I kind of joke it's the family business, but I was fortunate enough to start working with Sherwin-Williams when I was 16 years of age and spent my first 13 years in the industry in more of a paint store setting environment in various roles from store manager to outside sales. And for me, that was a really good foundational place to learn the paint industry. Really, every successful entrepreneur I've either listened to on a podcast or read a book or met in person, they just started and then they stuck with it until they became successful. Bet on yourself, go all in, and go after whatever your goals or dreams are, because it will be rewarding in the end.
Welcome to the Franchise Freedom Podcast, where you can escape the corporate trap through franchise ownership. Here's your host, Giuseppe Grammatico, the Franchise Guide.
Welcome to the Franchise Freedom Podcast. I'm your host, Giuseppe Grammatico, your franchise guide, the show where we help corporate executives experience time and financial freedom via franchising. Very excited today. No more solo episodes. We're going to mix it up. You've asked for guests. So we have my good friend, JD Mason from Paint Easy. JD, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Giuseppe. Pleasure to be here with you today.
Looking forward to it, and I appreciate you. We had some, at least on my end, some technical difficulties using a new platform. So it's never a perfect world. Doesn't matter how many franchise podcasts you do. So I'm looking forward to this one. We've been working together recently, talking quite a bit via email. This is our first kind of face-to-face, and wanted to invite you to the show, learn about Paint Easy, learn about the painting industry. But before we dive in, if you can share with the guests a little bit of background on who JD is, and then we'll go into why you started Paint Easy.
Yeah, thank you for the question. And again, it's a pleasure to be here with you today. As far as kind of a personal background, I'm married, 3 kids. My oldest is 21, and then I've got to go down to 15 years of age as well. So kind of the busy time of life. Kids keep us busy with a lot going on, but I'm really pleased to have kids that are high functioning and doing well in society as well. As far as kind of professional background, I say I'm in the family business. I grew up around the painting industry. My dad spent 46 years working with Sherwin-Williams, and I was able to be around painting contractors a lot as a young kid. And I remember many overnight trips with my dad to commercial job sites, and being 10 to 12 years old with a hard hat, walking a commercial building and meeting painting contractors and those kind of things. And so I kind of joke it's the family business, but I was fortunate enough to start working with Sherwin-Williams when I was 16 years of age and spent my first 13 years in the industry in more of a paint store setting environment in various roles from store manager to outside sales. And for me, that was a really good foundational place to learn the paint industry, and really enjoyed my time there, but was looking for really an opportunity to make a name for myself outside of what my dad had built and the reputation he had there within the paint industry. And so I was fortunate enough to be recruited by another painting franchise where I spent 2 years there working and mentoring new franchise owners. And so that was really kind of my start within the paint industry, and also kind of how it leads us into Paint Easy. But background, paint industry, and then golf. Outside of work, golf would be my hobby that I love to do as much as possible. Just don't get very much time to do it anymore.
Yeah, you got to make time. With the family, it's difficult, but that's why you got to get the kids and everyone else involved, right? So you make a family outing. No, that's awesome. So it sounds like you've been in the paint industry for a while. What motivated you? I guess, couple things. What motivated you to start Paint Easy? And tell us about the model. What is Paint Easy?
Yeah, the motivation has changed, honestly, over time. Initially, when I left the other painting franchise, it was kind of a unique position. They were in massive growth mode in order to exit to a larger PE type investor who bought the organization. And so I experienced working with a lot of new franchise owners, which I loved. What I didn't love was, it was more like the franchise owners were a number and just try to get in as many numbers as possible so that they could get their exit as large as possible. And I just saw a major disconnect between corporate team and the franchise owners I was working with. And so when I left and started Pain Easy, it was really with a focus of, having attention to detail with the franchise owners. Let's make sure that they understand we have their backs the whole way, that we're trying to build alongside them and help them. And it was, we went through a slow growth period to start. The first 8 years, we had 8 locations, and it was because we were really focused on attention to those franchise owners and helping them be successful. And I mentioned we've kind of transitioned a little bit more. We've grown to over 70 locations in the last 2 years. And so it's still with the emphasis of, the franchisee first, that we're going to train them. We feel like we train them better than any other organization out there, and that we have the support layers to really support them long term. But I've really recognized that there's a couple superpowers to franchising that's really where the mindset has evolved over time. I think the first superpower of franchising that I've learned about was all the different owners coming from different walks of life, different backgrounds, different, potentially even countries, life experiences, industries. And when you pool collective thought together and really are working together towards long-term goals, there's some really unique perspective that comes from it if you're willing to allow it. And so we're really continuing to evolve as a company based upon the thought process and the backgrounds of those owners that we work with. So that's been a unique thing to be a part of. And then really the other thing that not that I didn't love our owners to start with, but just really how much of a blessing it is to have amazing partners that you link arms with and start growing a business. And that's really kind of shifted the mindset over time as well. Just how amazing franchising can be when you get the right people in place and partner with those people versus counting them as a number. And so that's really where the evolution I feel like is taking place with us as a company.
Yeah, and I've seen. I didn't realize the size. I didn't realize it was 70 up to 70. So that's quite impressive. And yeah, I mean, in having conversations every single day with people taking a look at franchises, a lot of them, I wouldn't say all, but I would say a large percentage of the people I'm talking with have never owned the business before. They're a corporate executive. They're maybe experiencing a layoff, ready to leave their job, just want something else. And, money is important. But overall, they're like, what's the culture look like? What's the support? Am I just going to get trained at a home office and then just kind of, the franchisor says, have at it and kind of figure it out. And now you've forgotten everything you've learned at the home office. So, I think what's very unique is such a hands-on approach, really spending the time with the new franchisees, going out, doing a sales call, if I'm not mistaken, right? Setting up some vendor relationships. I think, that training in action is what really stands out. And support, culture, which, culture, you're going to get talking to the franchisees, and validation, you're going to hear that over and over. And I hear that. So I'm not on the calls, but I get the feedback from some of the families that we work with, which is super impressive. What else about the support really differentiates Pain Easy? Because at the end of the day, there are multiple painting companies, right? And some are doing residential, some are doing commercial, some are doing both. What really differentiates that? Because, some people will come back and say, well, there's a lot of painting companies in the area. So what are, some of the other, kind of key differentiators that make Pain Easy different?
Yeah, from the support level, I think some of the things that make us different is really the team. I'm blessed to have an amazing team around me. Our COO, Jason, he comes from a tech background. He has degrees in mechanical engineering. He also just got his doctorate in business administration with an emphasis on leadership. And so he brings a unique perspective to the team from a tech background and then also from a leadership background. Then Mike, our corporate training manager, he played college and professional basketball and then was a college basketball coach. and then transitioned into 10 years of corporate training. And so he brings an amazing mindset of development, of training, and working with the owners and helping them see, with hitting minimum, like minor goals, building into more macro goals, how they can really build the business long term. And then we have another trainer that he's been in franchising his whole life. His parents are franchisors. He worked on their corporate team. He also worked as a franchisee in their system. And then he went to work with another franchise in the home services space for 3+ years. And so he brings a unique perspective of franchising to the table as well. And then from my personal background, having more of a paint technical background, we kind of train from unique perspectives, or, we take our strengths of where we train the best and then, allow the others to kind of step in where they're the best as well. You mentioned kind of in the field too. That's we've been doing that since day one. When I worked with the other franchise organization, they would just come to our corporate office, and then it felt like a little bit of sending them out to sink or swim at that point. And for me, there was it just felt like a disconnected handoff. You were at our offices, but you've never really seen it in the field. Good luck. And so from day one, since we've been franchising at PayneZ, we've always went out to their market for what we call launch week. And we're actually going on sales calls with them. We're helping them recruit the labor to do the work. We're getting the introductions made on a local level with them. And for me, that just helps get the business started on a lot firmer foundation, and also helps the franchise owner to feel like, hey, I can get success right out of the gate, and let me just continue that after they leave. And so that's how we get them started. But then it's even after that, there's daily conversations for 60 days after that point as well. It's making sure, they're going to have questions, they're going to have concerns that are going to happen. And so still helping them realize like, hey, you're not on your own, even though we're not there.
Yeah, that is, from a former franchisee, I think that is super helpful. With my first franchisor, we went out, I remember, on our first sales call, and I closed that deal. It was a very small deal. Between the trip and the driving back and forth, there wasn't much profit built in, but really, you started gaining some confidence. Like, okay,
right,
I'm starting to understand the lingo. There's a sales process that you really need to follow. Mistakes were made, but that's fine. You want to make those mistakes on the smaller accounts, just kind of figuring everything out, the pricing and everything else involved. But I think that's a missing piece. It's almost like I compare it to, I've never gone, but people have gone to like a Tony Robbins conference, and they're really pumped up over the weekend. They come home and it's like, okay, where do I start with this information? It's almost like you need Tony to come and really
right.
kind of implement everything. And I think that's a big part of it. It's like, we show you the way, we show you the training, the best practices, the technology. Now let's do it together. Let's get some sales. Let's get some vendors. Let's get maybe some employees. And I think that's the missing piece. And I'm not saying some franchisors do it and others, there may be limited training in the field, but I think that's the key differentiator. I think that's the missing piece in really setting someone up for success, because that first year is crucial. That first year is that I call it the builder year, where I ran my business full time, and I reinvested all the profits back into the business. My wife was working at the time, so we were able to do that, but I wanted to build the perfect team, learn the lingo, the technology, the systems, the CRM. And sometimes that perfect team, sometimes that initial hire maybe doesn't work out, and that's okay. It happens. You're dealing with people, and that person, eventually you find the right person to lead. I mentioned, technology. So, how does PayneZ leverage technology to improve, customer satisfaction, efficiencies for the franchisees?
Yeah, so we're a big believer. One of our core values is innovation, and another core value is solution seeking. So looking at problems and how can we solve them, and utilizing technology to do that. And so we're using different AI technology for client, acquisition, or even nurturing of clients through a sales process. Our CRM also helps with that process as well. But yeah, we're using technology from start to finish throughout the process on the client journey. And we believe long term that we have to continue to even keep reinvesting into the technology aspect. If I'm to look from, being 25 years now in the paint industry, looking at maybe how has the industry evolved or where's it going and those kind of things. As far as the application of paint, the selling of paint jobs and overall, those have stayed pretty much the same in 25 years. The paint products in general are pretty much the same. There's little differences here and there as well, but in general, it's stayed the same. What's changing, though, is the buying behavior of clientele, the way you market to a client, and just the use of technology in our everyday lives. And so we feel that we have to continue to keep evolving from a technology standpoint to lead from the front versus following from the back. And so we'll continue to add new technology over time as it makes sense as well.
Love that. Now that makes a lot of sense. And this is more out of curiosity. This is just a question that just popped in my mind. So if hypothetically, if someone has, a painting business, maybe they have their current painting business, in reality, they can really convert, reach out to Paint Easy, maybe convert that business and take advantage of, I would assume, I assume you would take advantage of the technology, but I would assume maybe the better pricing, the economies of scale,
right,
dealing with the national franchise. So have you seen that, or is that a possibility for someone that maybe owns a mom and pop painting business?
Yeah, it's definitely a possibility. We haven't had that come across as an opportunity at this point, but we would definitely be open to it with the right, potential owner that way. But yeah, there would be opportunities to systemize and involve more processes, utilizing technology, having a marketing team behind those individuals as well that they probably don't have right now with their own business. And then the economies of scale with pricing. That's one of the areas I feel like we do really well. Having worked for the paint companies before, it allows us to really know what we can negotiate, maybe where we can't as much, and really be able to put our owners in a great place that way too.
Awesome. Yeah, I just popped in my head. I was just, out of curiosity. I'm like, wow, I know, local painting companies, and they always complain about, being behind on quotes, and then there's no real follow-up aside from, maybe a text message to do the job. It's with a couple breakdown, but there's no follow-up system, email, the invoice sometimes is written on a piece of paper. So yeah, it's, I said there's massive benefit there, and you don't have to figure all that out, figuring out the CRM and how to price and all that, because, that's the other thing. There's changes in pricing, and that's another thing. You want a system that can take into consideration. For example, we work with a flooring franchise, and I think of all their SKUs, 2 SKUs would be potentially affected by the tariffs, and it was reflected immediately. So the franchisee, wasn't blindsided, giving the wrong quote, and then obviously potentially taking the loss on the job. So that is crucial as well, and just being up to date with all current pricing. 70 franchisees, many of them, obviously, they're newer franchisees, and then you have some of the originals. Can you share, a success story, someone that, kind of started out and where they are today?
Yeah, no, thank you for this question. As I mentioned, the people are what really makes the franchise go, and it's the amazing owners or partners that we have that really makes us. And I can think of 2 that really hit home, but we have other success stories, but there's 2 that both grew up in homes where they didn't have, their families rented, or one was even a single mother household where she worked 3 jobs and didn't grow up, very humble beginnings. And to be able to build the business to where now they've purchased a very nice home, they're providing very well for their families, and have continued to grow the business. That's just been really rewarding. It was at just over a year ago at our annual convention where one of the owners was able to announce to the team of other partners that they were able to buy their first home, and they were the first homeowner in their family. It was very emotional to be a part of that, and just to see that the business has changed their personal trajectory of life, but it's also impacting other family members and their other distant family members as well. So,
And how long have they been a franchise owner of Pain Easy?
yeah, one of them's been 5 years and the other one's been 7 years.
So yeah, life changing. And that's really not a lot of time if you think about it, right? So that's huge that you can have that kind of impact. Very hard to do with, keeping your W-2 job. I know I tried, did not work. And that's why I switched over to entrepreneurship. It can be rewarding. I always tell people it's a lot of work. A franchise gives you kind of that what I call an unfair advantage. Man, it truly is life changing. And I think, going into it, you really need, I always recommend whatever that why is. There's no right or wrong, but that why is going to get you through that roller coaster of the ups and downs because, a lot of stuff going on. Sometimes you're busy. Sometimes maybe things slow down. So you want to, kind of go back to why you got into this, right? Because it's definitely, even with the franchise will give you that unfair advantage, but there's still a lot of work. It's the franchise will not bring in money on its own. They're giving you the blueprint and you need to follow it. Anything you want to add to that? Because that's something that I think a lot of people have this thing like, I'm just going to buy the franchise and it kind of runs on its own.
Yeah, we like to tell people the franchise, and with our franchise, it's not the easy button, but it's the easier button. And so you do have that blueprint. You have a team that's willing to stand behind you and work alongside you to help you build, but you still have to put forward the effort. You have to follow the systems and processes. You have to be willing to commit to efforts. If you just think it's going to be on autopilot and start printing cash for you, unfortunately, we're not. If there is that opportunity, I'm going to sign up for it personally as well. But that's the biggest thing I've learned in business ownership is that it's going to be the hardest thing you've done, but it's also going to be the most rewarding thing that you do as well.
Awesome. Yeah, I agree. We're definitely on the same page there. So another question that comes up when someone is looking at a franchise is that, they want the franchise itself to give back to the community. You really kind of make a difference in people's lives. And, sometimes it's not the product or service necessarily that, that changes lives, but it's what the franchisor does. And you talk to us about, what the franchisees do to kind of give back, help the community.
Yeah, that's also one of our core values is community. And it's been something that, we feel an obligation as a company, not only from corporate, but as franchisees to really support and give back to the communities that bless us so much with building our businesses as well. And 4 years ago, we instituted a collective effort as a group called Rooms for Hope. And Rooms for Hope was built upon, so I'm fortunate, I was a cancer survivor 7 years ago. I went through, and for me, it was a minimal thing. And so as I was going through every 3 to 6 months, going through cancer screenings and testing, I would go to these cancer centers and just seeing people, their lives so challenged by, cancer or other illnesses that they were facing, that I wanted to find a way that we could, give back to the community as a collective body of owners and from corporate. And so we created Rooms for Hope 4 years ago. And what we do is a portion of proceeds of projects that we do go back to us painting rooms free of charge for people dealing with cancer to create that room for hope or peace as they're going through that cancer battle or maybe through the recovery process that they're dealing with. And it's truly been one of the most humbling things that I've ever been able to be a part of. It's also one of the most rewarding things. If I could do nothing but Rooms for Hope projects, I would. And we've been blessed from corporate. We try to do at least one per month from a corporate level. Our owners, they do them. It could be monthly, it could be quarterly or annually, depending on where they're at in the business and whatnot as well. But we've been blessed we recently did a couple pediatric cancer individuals and we're able to do, like a Lightning McQueen Cars room and then also a Star Wars themed room, and just to see the smiles on their face and something to, give them a place of refuge as they're going through those challenges, that it's truly, like I said, been humbling, but also so rewarding to be a part of doing that as well.
Wow. I was not aware of that. And I appreciate you sharing. Where can people find, or what's the website for Rooms for Hope?
Yeah, roomsforhope.com. And it's also connected through paineasy.com as well.
Perfect. And we'll link that in the show notes as well. Taking kind of a step back, just in general, there are a lot of people listening. So we polled the listeners over just over, going on 5.5 years of having the podcast. And we ask questions, what topics, who do you want on the show? What do you want to hear about? And we hear all great things. We've had topics, suggestions and all that. And the biggest thing is did not have him on the show, but we listened to another podcast, had the IFA president talk about, most people in their lives, that's a big percentage, have thought about owning a business. So the number they gave, and this is a hard one to figure out, but they came up with a number with 75% of people out there, they gave, and this is a hard one to figure out, but they came up with a number with quarters of that group, so another 75% of that existing group said, as far as their reason goes, and this is the number one reason, they did not know where to start. I find that extremely interesting because we are in the information age, ChatGPT, Gemini, the internet, my gosh, millions and millions of podcasts and TED Talks and all that kind of stuff. And people are almost crippled by the amount of knowledge, the amount of information. I always say, knowledge is not power anymore. Knowledge is useless if not applied in a way, right? It's like, well, I got the best workout, but what good is it if you're not actually doing that workout? So, what advice would you give to someone that is kind of, they want the change, want to explore franchise ownership, but they're almost paralyzed as to where to get started? So just in general terms, what advice would you give to that person?
Yeah. So the biggest challenge that I see from those who are leaving corporate America and joining, whether it's a franchise or just any business, venture at all, it's a mindset shift. And so that's the number one advice I always give to somebody is start listening to podcasts or reading books and then applying, as you were mentioning, applying principles from those, because the mindset changes so drastically. When we're in corporate America, depending on our role, it's daily or it's a weekly focus. Maybe it's a quarterly focus if we're in sales, where we're trying to hit those bonus levels or whatnot. But with business ownership, we might be starting to look at a 10 or 15-year plan or vision, and then we're scaling it back to what are our annual or quarterly goals that we need to hit those. But it's such a broader range spectrum. And as you were mentioning, when you started your business, the first year, you weren't taking any money from it. You're reinvesting back into the business to continue to build that vision or future that you're looking for with your business. And it's such a mindset shift from I'm collecting a check every 2 weeks. I'm looking at my goals for the day or the week or maybe the quarter. And not that those don't exist from business ownership. It's just a different frame of mind and having to kind of reapply some of those principles that we're doing, in corporate and reapply them or refocus them from a business ownership perspective. But I think that mindset's the first thing. If you get yourself in the proper mindset to be a business owner, then now I can start taking the actions to actually make those things come to play. I think the other thing, just the action part of it, there are so many options. I mean, in franchising, I think I've heard it's 4,500 or more different franchise opportunities. Then not to look past the opportunity of just starting something on your own as well. There's many opportunities that we could all jump into, but at the end of the day, it takes action, and we can evaluate until we don't do anything, or we can take action. And really, every successful entrepreneur I've either listened to on a podcast or read a book or met in person, they just started and then they stuck with it until they became successful. That's really business ownership, is really those who are willing to stick with it the long run, continue making improvements along the way and learning from failures or poor decisions and whatnot. But it's those who stuck with it for the long game. That's really what it's about.
Yeah, that is great advice. And to your point, right? Action. It's all about action. It's building momentum. I did a show way back when we talked about goal planning, and goal planning is great, but goal planning in many cases wasn't working for me because there were no action steps. lose 20 pounds. Great. All right. I got a whole year to figure out what the heck to do. So it's almost building habits. And those habits could be spending 15 minutes every morning before work. Maybe before even you brush your teeth, you wake up and you do a little research. The mindset shift is huge. Walking in, people, I hate my job. I'm looking for a franchise. Got to cover my $200K salary. Can that be done the first month? And it's just like, hold on a sec. What are we trying to do here? So it's really taking a step back. And not everyone is built or made for business ownership. I hate to say that, but it's true. And that's what you get from me. And it sounds like from you as well, where you have to be direct, but why set someone up for failure? I mean, hey, these are some changes that if they are made, maybe it's something we revisit. But business ownership isn't because, I don't like my current situation, so the grass is going to be greener. That's definitely not the case. The mindset shift is big. Create those habits, learn, educate. To your point, you nailed it. I think that's some great advice, and you don't have to figure it all out in one shot. You'll get there little by little. And I think the franchise, in my opinion, gives you the unfair advantage because it's all laid out for you and you got the support. I have a question. I'm stuck here. What do I need to do? Where should my COGS be at? Close ratio on leads, like all that. You have a team. You mentioned national conference. National convention. That is, in my opinion, a mastermind. It has nothing to do with the pain or pain easy. This is a networking event. This is everyone's bringing backgrounds from, you had a painting background. I had a Wall Street background. Everyone's bringing all these different and great experiences to the table. That alone, in my opinion, is priceless because now you have this mastermind. Now you have this network of individuals that you can build off of, share experiences, ideas, maybe hook up with your local neighbors at Pain Easy and go together on a marketing plan, share staff on a large commercial job. There's so many advantages that I think people overlook. And that alone, I mean, you can't pay for that. I mean, that is just, to me, it's priceless. And then one of the major advantages that franchising brings to the table, Pain Easy brings to the table. And just wanted to kind of bring that story home. Like, that's huge. There's so much benefit. I can't even express, what I got out of it and what I hear others getting out of it. As we wrap up the show, and I really appreciate all the insights, any other kind of last piece of advice you'd like to share with the listeners before we wrap up the show?
Yeah, I think it goes back to, if you're at a place where you're evaluating an opportunity, take that action, take the next steps. As you were mentioning, the grass isn't necessarily greener, but I find if you've been had a background in a competitive nature, maybe it was sports, maybe it was academics, maybe it was music, that you were a competitive person, you've been competitive now in your corporate life, put those things to play, bet on yourself, go all in and go after whatever your goals or dreams are, because it will be rewarding in the end. And, I think that's the awesome part about franchising. As you mentioned, it's kind of the shortcut or the easier button versus other options. And so just go after it. Make those goals and dreams come to fruition through your hard work and efforts.
I love this. JD, you heard it from JD. So guys, listen to this show twice. I would love your input. If you have any questions for myself, for JD, just leave them in the comments. You know where to contact us. I can pass those on to JD. JD, this was awesome. I really appreciate the insights. I really appreciate your time. And hopefully we'll see you next month at conference. But thanks again for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Take care.
You too. Thanks.
Thanks for tuning in. If you want to learn how to make the transition from corporate to owning your franchise, join Giuseppe on the next episode. You can also follow on all social media platforms and achieve financial and time freedom today.